So I was thinking about education the other day, like you do, right?
Whoa.
All those traumatic memories that we have and all those childhood things. And I feel like we've been the victims of one of the greatest bait and switches in history. Let me explain how. So for nearly a decade and a half, or however long it took to get through school, you are always told to compete. You have to come first in class, or not come last in class, whichever it is. You're trained on you must win.
Yeah.
Right? Even in an exam, you can't gently help each other. That's how I pass. When everything is an individual assignment, God forbid you collaborate on anything, that's called cheating. And then you graduate, you get through college, you throw that ugly looking hat in the air. Get to a workplace and the odds are stacked against that mindset. If you come just with a, hey, I must win mindset, that doesn't work. Because real success comes from building great stuff together.
Yep.
And I think we're trained and brought up in this competitive, you must win. Your picture gets put in the newspaper only if you come first in your entrance exam. But when nobody ever trains us on collaboration and helping each other.
I totally agree with you. How the world has changed, collaboration has become so important. Because when you look at 20th century, you had a craft and what you produced defined your success. Being an individual contributor, there was a value to it. But today, when you look at the world, most things you create today are more complex.
Yeah.
Take a smartphone, for example. You need collective intelligence, expertise to be able to create something like smartphone.
Yeah.
So today, your success depends on how you are able to collaborate with the others to produce something that could be a win for you personally. MIT has this really good research and that kind of gives you an insight. They say that when you put a team together, their collective brilliance is not equal to their individual brilliance.
Or the sum of the individual brilliance.
Some of the individual brilliance. It's actually depends on how well they're able to collaborate, work together, but you don't really need MIT research to tell you that. Your IPL auction would tell you, you've seen for 18 years, you can...
Don't bring up RCB. We won at least this.
Yeah, you can buy the most expensive players, but if they are not able to collaborate, you're not going to win. And so collaboration is the multiplier of this century.
I love that. I think that need for collaboration, and especially at work, is rising fast, right? HBR, I think, says teams, there's a 50% greater need for teams, for people, for humans to collaborate. And right from startups to big corporations, that need is huge. I think the research is good. MIT, I think we all know this in theory, right? But then how do you actually start with collaborating better? Where do you start?
Well, thinking about how do we collaborate, I think probably the more important question to ask is how do we see collaboration? Because the lens you bring to a team, to a project, to a relationship, to a partnership really shapes how you create trust, what kind of results you create. It's very important to think through how we define and how we see collaboration. When you think about how do we collaborate, you could actually play the game at 4 different levels. You could operate at 4 different levels. First level, and this is probably the level we shouldn't play at when you're thinking about teams, is the competitive level. And this is what you talked about. This is the default mode because that's the muscle that's been built in us for 25 years of our life, saying compete, come first. And the goal really becomes, when I walk into a room, is how do I win and how do they lose? I win, you lose mindset. And when you walk in with that, it can be very damaging. Now that works at a market level. When you're thinking about competition between the brands, what Adam Smith would call an invisible hand, it says that when we compete just in terms of the industries and sectors, you create that healthy competition, creates innovation, better products. But if you bring that into a team, into a project, into a partnership, that can be
damaging.
Yeah, you don't create value, you destroy value.
I agree. We're able to see that whenever companies, if you follow the curve of companies, the early 2000s, Microsoft, if you remember that, they did this thing called stack ranking where employees were actually graded against each other. And just how damaging that is, right? And led to these internal rivalries and a reduced collaboration. And actually, if you look at Microsoft's stock prices, their profit, it stagnated. Even their innovation stagnated in those early 2000s. You see this in so many different companies, not just Microsoft.
Yeah, I've seen that in our own organization. We tried a bit of it. We fell flat. And we really had to learn from that bad experience of what happens when you try and sort of create more competition between the teams. I think that was a great learning.
Yeah, I think us and them never works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could play at this very competitive level, which you shouldn't when you're thinking about a team or even cross teams. The second level is cooperation, cooperative level. How do you cooperate with each other? At this level, the goal becomes how do we give and take? How can I add value to you and how can you add value to me? It's all about finding that common ground, right? We may not agree on everything, but this is the piece that we can agree on, right? Where that value can be exchanged. Now, the problem starts when people are doing this give and take, there's one who is able to do that well, but there's other who is very good at taking but not giving.
So one giver and one taker. Right?
One giver and one taker, and then that kind of really becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Adam has this really good research. He's written a book about the whole give and take.
It's called Give and Take.
It's called Give and Take. And he talks about this. He actually, from his research, he defines, we as human beings, 3 categories. There are takers and there are givers.
And then it's a third category, right?
There are matchers.
Nice.
And when you look at these 3 categories of givers, takers, and matchers, it's almost like a bell curve. So you have
Explain.
You have about 20%, roughly 20%, which who are takers. Who are like, what can I get out of it? What is the most value I can extract? Then you have givers who are other 20-25% who are like, hey, how can I help others, right? But then large percentage of us are matchers, which is about 55%. You have these 3 categories of people. When you think about who would get ahead in life, and we live in this dog-eat-dog world, as you talked about, who do you think will come on the top?
Obviously takers.
Takers, right? And that's the answer he found. The insight there is, but that's only in the short term.
Interesting.
Right? Takers will always come first when you look at Bangalore traffic. They'll edge you out and keep moving. But when you look at long term, it's the givers who come on the top.
Nice.
And he explains it really well because, see, you have this bell curve of 20% here, 20% here, and 55% who are the matchers. Think about how they operate. When they're dealing with the takers, they match the taking.
Nice.
And when they're dealing with the givers, they match the giving. So eventually the givers come on the top because of that. And that's a powerful thing. So what happens when you have this matcher or takers going against each other, they regress to being competitive. But when a matcher is working with a giver, because they both become givers, they actually graduate to collaborating, not even cooperating. I think that's a beautiful thing. So when you're thinking about this give and take, think long term. Think about how can I be a giver, and you will really thrive long term.
Naval Ravikant also talks about long-term games with long-term people because the short-term is tempting and sometimes the short-term also is a need, right? Think of when you're doing fundraising, when you think you want to just say, please give me so I can take. But in that, even in a fundraising space, you think of it more as, hey, can we build a long-term relationship is so powerful. A great example I was thinking when you're talking about this giver, taker, matcher is Pixar has this thing called a brain trust, and it's very unique in a creative space because in the creative space, you don't want to hear feedback on your creative idea because you're so close to it. But they have this place where filmmakers actually come together, share their next idea, and then get feedback from each other. There's a lot of give and take in that space. And from that sort of brain trust space, Toy Story has come, Inside Out has come. Some of our favorite movies have been born there.
Very true. Pixar, in some ways, gives the credit for all their 23 Academy Awards
to the brain trust.
To brain trust, the rhythm that started. Okay, so the next level, you can be competitive, you can be cooperative. The next level you can go to is collaborative. And the goal here is not just give and take, but how can together we can create win-win solutions.
Yeah.
And the real magic happens here because there's a room here to co-create solutions that didn't exist. And because of that, value creation happens. Right? You add value that didn't exist before.
I love that. I think you're thinking through, hey, what is the win for you? Which is not very natural to us. Like, even if you think of it, when we sometimes go to a meeting, our first question that we talk about before the meeting is, what do we want to get out of this? And I think when you flip that and say, hey, what can we help them achieve in this meeting? That meeting is so much richer. I think a great example of this is, and this is at a massive scale, is what Amul was able to build, right? Dr. Verghese Kurian, he was able to take village level societies, district milk unions, and he was able to take state level federations and build this incredible system which gave farmers incredible economic empowerment. Like, they were taking home a huge share of the profit, which for farmers across India, it was game changing. That white revolution really was something else. It helped with technological advancements because then all these 3 groups work together to do incredible stuff. And what Amul has done has got global recognition today. It's no more just something in our space. I love this. So you've got competitive, cooperative, and collaborative. And you said there was a fourth.
There's a fourth one, which is a very rare one. We call it unconditional collaboration.
Interesting.
If collaboration, your goal is how can we create win-win solutions where both of us can win? Comes to unconditional collaboration, the goal is it's not even about my win. Your win is my win. You really operate at that level. Now I said it. This is rare, and it should be rare. It's not the level that you want to just go out and play with everyone.
Mother Teresa level, right? Yeah.
So obviously, if you're a parent, you see that with your children. You're able to see this in life partners, right? When you've done life for so long, your win becomes my win. But you also see this at work at some times, right? When people have played that, what you talked about, long-term game with long-term people, you start seeing the signs of this where the collaboration becomes very unconditional. And it's a result of the deep trust they have built, the result of that compounding. And because it's a result of that compounding, when you think about value here, you actually go from value addition to value multiplication. You multiply value. And if you've been able to sort of have those kind of relationships at work, then you have created something really special.
I agree. I think for me, a lot of my 30s was about significance for self. And in 40s, I think for me has been a lot more just say, if the other can win, that's the win. And I think coming to this place of bringing this to our deepest relationships, right? Whether it's at work, whether it's with our children, with our partners. And you're right, it is, there's a trusted few you can do this with, right? And when they succeed, you feel joy, not threat.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful place to be in. Because it's not just, I feel like, being a good person or good ethics or good strategy. It's such a great way to do life, to actually do life together and to move towards this, hey, we can create something which is incredible. It's this moment where life really transcends work. A world where we can actually create this unconditional space is a one we aspire to, we want to live in, and that's where real magic happens.